Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christina Carlin-Kraft. Christina Rose Carlin-Kraft was born on November 11, 1983, in a coastal town in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Kraft and Deanne Carlin. She had a natural flair for being in front of the camera, which would eventually shape her career path. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City for several years. However, her ultimate dream was to become a model, and her determination paid off. She eventually found success in the modeling industry. In her promotional material, Christina revealed that she enjoyed participating in photoshoots featuring high-end lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend she met on a 3-day Maxim magazine shoot, Christina was a charming and beautiful woman with a great sense of humor. With dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the essence of a fashion model. Christina had always dreamed of being on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, she met Alex Urtielli. They started dating soon after, and Alex became her supportive partner, never opposing her career choices. After a long-term relationship, they got engaged. The couple stayed together until Christina's death. Christina achieved her goal of becoming Cyber Girl of the Month for May 2009 and was invited to the Playboy mansion. She attended parties at the mansion, gaining entry into the glamorous world. This success marked the peak of her career, and her ambitions soared, especially after meeting Hugh Hefner, whose attention was hard to capture. However, despite this, Christina failed to become a Playboy magazine model. Thousands of girls send their photos to the magazine, but only one is chosen. At 26, Christina was considered too old for the magazine, which typically features younger models. This setback affected her confidence, but she continued modeling. Her extensive portfolio included work with Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, Vanity Fair, and many others. To further her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, not all brands were willing to work with her due to her explicit photo shoot. Christina's career began to decline after her appearance in Playboy, ultimately coming to an end. Overcoming this challenging period in her life was undoubtedly tough, but she always had Alex's support. Known for her elegant appearance, captivating beauty, and scandalous behavior, Christina made headlines in 2016 for causing a scene at the Smith, a restaurant in New York. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin-Kraft, 34, and her male companion got into an argument with the manager, Sergei Anakin, on March 6th over their bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager intervened. Witnesses claim Christina was drunk and falsely accused the manager of pushing her, but surveillance footage proved otherwise. She allegedly struck someone in the neck around 10 p.m., causing redness and significant pain. Christina was charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, the DA offered her a deal, and the charges were dropped on the condition that she remains trouble-free for 6 months. Christina has always had a fondness for Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, which she considered a safe haven. With this in mind, Alex purchased an apartment in Ardmore in 2018 and relocated to Pennsylvania with her. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore wasn't as safe as she had thought. On August 18, 2018, she contacted the police to report a robbery. Earlier that evening, Christina had spent time at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night were hazy. The next thing she recalled was waking up the following morning, feeling groggy and suspecting that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. She had no recollection of how she got home or if anyone had accompanied her. At the time, Alex was away on a business trip. Feeling uneasy and anxious, Christina repeatedly expressed her concerns about her safety. During the investigation, police obtained CCTV footage showing a car arriving at Christina's apartment around 3 a.m. Unconscious in the back seat, Christina was being driven by a thief who stole her keys entered her home, and plundered over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer bags, pillows, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The thief remained in the apartment for about an hour and a half before returning to the car, helping Christina inside, and then leaving her in the hallway. They placed the keys back in her purse and drove away. The police swiftly identified the perpetrator using a credit card statement. The driver was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. He was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with Virginia license plates. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17th, which was confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. While the police were still searching for Andre Melton to recover Christina's stolen items, a far more serious crime took place. Just 4 days later, on August 22, 2018, Alex Celli called the police, asking them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin-Kraft, as he was unable to contact her and was on his way home. Christina wasn't answering her calls or texts. Upon arriving home, Alex found the apartment door locked from the inside. He then checked the security system, revealing that someone had opened the front door and the balcony door during the night. The police were called to the address and had to force entry by breaking down the front door, which was locked from the inside. Upon entering the apartment, they were immediately met with signs of a crime scene, including visible blood. A body lay on the bed, covered with a blanket. Lifting the blanket, they found a woman who had been severely beaten. Unfortunately, it was Christina Carlin-Kraft, and she was already dead. Her body showed signs of blows all over, and her nose was broken. There was also a strangulation mark around her neck. It was later discovered that Christina had been strangled with her own sweatpants. When the detectives identified the victim, they had to break the devastating news to Alex, who was waiting outside. His beloved Christina was dead. This shocking revelation sparked immediate suspicion, as the people closest to the victim are often implicated in such cases. The police did not dismiss the possibility that Alex might be the perpetrator. Alex and Christina had a long history together, and anything could have transpired between them. It was Alex who had contacted the police station, expressing concern for Christina's safety, only for her to be found dead soon after. These events seemed too coincidental. It was possible that Alex had orchestrated the scenario to divert suspicion away from himself. The investigators requested that Alex accompany them to the police station to answer some questions. He agreed without hesitation. During the questioning, Alex explained that he had an urgent work commitment in New York on August 21st and had planned to return. The following night, August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to bid her good night, but she didn't answer. Given her habitual wakefulness at this hour, Alex grew anxious. He made several more calls, but Christina remained unresponsive. After reviewing the security system, he discovered suspicious activity in the apartment that night, prompting him to relinquish his business and rush back to Ardmore. After hearing Alex's story, the police no longer believed he was responsible for Christina's murder. His alibi checked out, and he couldn't have been in two places at once. They cleared him as a suspect, but the question remained: who killed Christina? Who would want her dead? The investigators looked into Christina's report of a robbery 4 days before her murder, suspecting a connection between the two crimes. This led them to Andre Melton, the thief who stole from Christina's apartment. Maybe he returned to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Perhaps he discovered she had reported him to the police and decided to take revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was found, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his address, however, they discovered he was no longer there. Despite his absence, they did find some of Christina's belongings still at the location. The police also managed to obtain surveillance footage from the night of the crime, which showed Christina leaving her apartment, then returning a few hours later with an unknown man. The footage was recorded at 3:08 a.m., and surprisingly, the man was not Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage revealed that the unknown man did not leave Christina's apartment again. The police later found an explanation for this using CCTV cameras on the streets of Ardmore. They discovered that Christina had visited a Philadelphia bar before returning to her apartment. Investigators reviewed the CCTV footage from the bar, which showed Christina meeting a man who later hugged her. This was the same man she had returned to her apartment with. After leaving the bar, Christina and her new friend were involved in an altercation. In the days that followed, detectives worked to reconstruct Christina's movements on the day she died, gathering data to piece together the events leading up to the crime. The police quickly ruled out Melton as a suspect, as he was not with Christina on the day of her death. However, it remained unclear whether her death was connected to the earlier robbery or simply a coincidence. On August 25th, the police received a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who had driven Christina and her companion that night, came forward. According to Sanford, Christina and the man had hailed him down rather than using the taxi app and had negotiated the fare. Sanford reported that the couple seemed affectionate and did not arouse his suspicion. When they arrived at their destination, Christina got out and directed Sanford where to go. It turned out that she didn't have any cash and offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford declined. Her friend then offered him $100 to wait for 10 to 15 minutes while they went inside. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her companion had returned. The couple, Christina and Alex, entered their second-floor apartment around 3 a.m. About an hour later, at 4 a.m., Christina made a call to her cousin, but she didn't speak. Instead, her cousin heard a man's voice in the background, warning Christina not to call the police. The call abruptly ended before the cousin could gather more information. It remains unclear why the cousin didn't call 911 after hearing this. The police were able to piece together the crime's timeline thanks to the door sensors in the apartment, which recorded exact times for each door opening. The records showed that someone opened the door at 3:08 a.m. and again at 5:10 a.m. Around the same time, the system detected that someone had opened the sliding glass door on the balcony, which explained why the surveillance cameras didn't capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment, leading them to assume that the perpetrator had jumped off the balcony. Police sought public's help through media, releasing surveillance images of two men, Andre Melton and the one at Christina's apartment the night she died. In a surprising turn of events, Andre Melton, whose whereabouts was still unknown to the detectives, contacted the police himself. He confessed to stealing valuables from Christina, but vehemently denied any involvement in her murder. The police were perplexed by this unexpected call, as they were still unable to establish a definitive link between the theft and Christina's death. It was possible that this was all part of a strategy devised by the two suspects. It seemed that Melton's intention was not to surrender to the authorities, but to proclaim his innocence in Christina's murder. On August 26th, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects featured in the released pictures. He shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. The caller revealed that the suspect had previously chased a woman in Love Park, Philadelphia, and followed her into the local family court building, where he molested her and became aggressive, shouting and causing destruction. The incident led to a 2-hour stay in a psychiatric hospital, costing $70. However, the suspect was admitted without being identified, as no one wanted to deal with him. The police were left with a mystery on their hands. The caller then provided even more critical information, stating that the suspect bragged about recently strangling a woman, taking great pleasure and satisfaction from the act. Upon hearing this, investigators strongly believed that they had found the killer of Christina Carlin-Kraft. the police station received another call from a man who claimed to be a relative of the suspect from Philadelphia. He identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, who had previously served a prison sentence for robbery. Harris was released from prison on July 15th, just 5 weeks before Christina's death. After conducting a thorough background check, investigators concluded that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no connection and had never crossed paths before. Therefore, the police ruled out any possibility of a link between the two crimes. Furthermore, the police gained access to Harris's phone records, which revealed that he had sent several messages on August 22nd. One of the texts mentioned that he had met an attractive woman and was planning to visit her apartment on August 28th. With this new evidence, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris and deemed it crucial to apprehend him as soon as possible, as they were unsure of his next move. However, tracking Harris down proved to be a challenge, as he had left no trace. Investigators finally got a break when they contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, and learned that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, they discovered that Harris was already on the bus when they spoke with his sister. The police realized they wouldn't be able to catch up with him, leaving the Pittsburgh police as their last hope. It was essential to be in the right place at the right time to apprehend Harris. The police investigating Christina's death reached out to the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They provided the exact time of the bus's arrival in Pittsburgh and sent over a photo of Harris. The fugitive task force then set up an ambush, blocking all potential escape routes, ready to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. Shortly after, one of the employees spotted the bus approaching. They allowed Harris time to calmly disembark, avoiding any sudden moves that might provoke a reaction. About 10 minutes later, a policeman intercepted him. I saw his eyes scanning, searching for an escape route, but it was too late. According to a Pittsburgh police officer, when the officer asked Harris to identify himself, he provided a false name. He was subsequently arrested and taken into custody at the police station. Detectives from Philadelphia traveled to Pittsburgh to question Harris. They requested that he recount the events of the night he met Christina. Harris claimed to have seen her on multiple occasions at bars and nightclubs in Philadelphia. Christina Carlin-Kraft was struggling to adjust to her new life in New York, which had drastically altered her daily routine and environment. As a result, she would frequently visit bars, cafes, and nightclubs, but she was always by herself since Alex was constantly working and she had not yet formed new friendships. It was common for men at these establishments to approach her, taking advantage of her solo status. Harris was one of those men. Harris claimed he was drunk and high on illegal drugs when he met Christina. They had a drink, then went to her place, where they drank more and had consensual sex. Harris demanded $1,200, but Christina refused, sparking a heated argument. Harris said she hit him with a wine bottle, so he hit her back, causing her to fall. When she tried to call the police, he strangled her with sweatpants until she passed out. Jonathan Harris's story had inconsistencies. A toxicology report on Christina's body found only alcohol, contradicting his claim of a single hit. When confronted, he admitted lying. Initially, Harris denied involvement, but later confessed to beating her, saying, "I panicked," and covering her because he didn't want to see her. When the trial began, Harris, despite having confessed to the crime, pleaded not guilty, like many other criminals who later retract their confessions. However, the investigators had assembled a substantial amount of evidence, making it difficult for Harris and his lawyer to build a strong defense. They anticipated a sentence of 22 to 40 years for third-degree murder and attempted to avoid a life sentence. Nevertheless, the prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence that convinced the court that the crime was premeditated. During the trial, the court heard testimony from a man who had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic. This same man had previously contacted the police. He revealed that Jonathan Harris had earlier confessed to him, stating, "There's nothing like squeezing somebody and feeling the last breath leave their body." In August 2019, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 22 to 45 years. The judge added the extra decades to ensure that Harris would never be freed, sending a message to future governors or pardon boards. In December 2018, Philadelphia police arrested Andre Melton for the robbery of Christina Carlin-Kraft's apartment. In March 2020, the court sentenced him to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, which means Melton will be under court supervision for a total of 7 years. Before learning his fate, Melton said, "I would like to apologize to the family for any grief or pain that I caused. I am not the bad person the district attorney is trying to make me out to be." This story is about a woman whose life is filled with lies from beginning to end. You will learn how the unscrupulous deceiver ends up in pursuit of big money and how many human destinies it can affect. Michelle grew up in the town of Hurst in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas. She had a younger sister, Laura. The girl's mother left home in search of a better life, so the upbringing of children was the father. It was not easy for a man to raise 2 daughters alone. He survived on occasional earnings at a construction site and often relied on alcohol. In search of easy money, he repeatedly thought up and implemented devious plans for profit. He would take a job at one factory or another and deliberately injure himself in order to obtain insurance money compensation. The fraud scheme worked, but not for long. With the help of CCTV cameras at one of the workplaces, the scheme was uncovered, and Michelle and Laura's father was sent into custody. Michelle grew up in a world of lies, deceit, and manipulation from childhood. This was her normal life, from which she wanted to escape by any means possible. But it is impossible to escape from herself, because lies have already become a part of her life, and she simply did not know how to live differently. The girl dreams of growing up faster to get out of the hated poverty. At the age of 15, Michelle looks very spectacular, a petite brunette of athletic build. She attracts a lot of interest from guys both of her own and older age. Even then, Michelle realizes that with the help of her feminine power and charm, she can easily manage to manipulate any men in her environment in order to get what she wants. So in her life begins a series of love relationships with different men. At the age of 17, Michelle drops out of school and marries for the first time to 16-year-old Kenneth O'Brien. She informs the boyfriend that she is expecting a baby. Kenneth, taking full responsibility for his young wife and future child, enlists in the army. The couple moves frequently. 2 more children are born to them in this marriage. One city is replaced by another. Temporary housing of the military was not the limit of Michelle's dreams. Such a life does not suit her, and after 5 years, she leaves, naming the reason for divorce beatings and cheating on the part of her husband. Michelle returns to her native Hearst. In front of relatives and friends, she appears as a victim of domestic violence and receives the necessary support and begins to organize her life anew. After a while, she falls in love with her former classmate Brandon. The young man is head over heels in love with Michelle and gladly accepted her 3 children. The lovers prepare for the wedding. However, on the eve of the wedding, Michelle infuriates Brandon. It turns out that the girl did not divorce her first husband. She was very afraid to talk to him about divorce because of the abuse, so she did not send the documents. With the help of a lawyer, this issue was quickly settled and the couple was able to marry in 1994. At first, family life flowed calmly and measured. Brandon was engaged in the development of his IT company, and Michelle worked as a dental assistant. But quiet family life was not the limit of Michelle's dreams. She has always needed more. She starts bringing home all sorts of dental equipment and supplies. The cash doesn't fit in her purse. Brandon suspected something wrong. Eventually, Michelle was caught stealing. It was only by luck that a trial was avoided. But Brandon's trust issues with his wife were just beginning. Responding to neighbors' reports that cars were frequently arriving at the house while he was at work, Brandon installed a tape recorder in several rooms of the house. Listening to the tape, he heard various men visiting their home throughout the day. Brandon does his own little investigation and learns that the reason for the divorce in Michelle's first marriage was her numerous infidelities, not her husband's beatings, as she told everyone. Brandon's patience broke and he demanded a divorce. Michelle was furious that Brandon initiated the divorce, and while he was at work, she got back at him. "I had a very nice saltwater aquarium with thousands of dollars worth of fish in it," Brandon says. "She poured Comet into it and killed all the fish." But Michelle didn't stop there. Brandon also had a beloved dog named Domino. Michelle stuffed the dog with sleeping pills, which led to the death of the living creature. Michelle put Domino to sleep. "If you're shocked at this point, we've only scratched the surface," Brandon says. "It was a nightmare that wouldn't stop. You can't make that girl go away." Unfortunately, Brandon learned the truth about Michelle when his own marriage was completely destroyed. Everything Michelle did with Brandon Dixon pales in comparison to her adventures with other men. It was later revealed that John Paul Ray, also a student at the high school Michelle attended in Hearst, was the father of her first child. Instead of revealing this information to John, she told Kenneth O'Brien that the child was his, forcing him to marry her. Kenneth, for 13 years, thought the eldest son was his own. John later told police that Kenneth paid child support from age 5 to 18 and did not know he was not the father. After Brandon and Michelle divorced, she moved in with John, the father of her first child. They lived in a common-law marriage for 8 years. Their relationship came to an abrupt end when John began to suspect his wife of cheating. Michelle didn't deny it. She confirmed the affair on the side. John moved out, leaving most of Michelle's possessions. Michelle's next love was Greg Williams. They were both not so young anymore. Both had a history of past marital failures. The man was married twice and had a daughter. After Greg and Katie divorced in 2003, the couple agreed to share custody of their common daughter, Taylor. However, there was no formal agreement on child support, because the former spouses had a good relationship. Rich, successful, and generous Greg was a perfect match for Michelle. In 2007, Greg and Michelle had a common daughter, Michaela. A year later, they got married. Their marriage was like the American dream. Money, children, love, it was all in abundance. Michelle seemed to have made it through the thorns to the stars and got the life she had always dreamed of. Greg Williams held his family in very high esteem. He grew up in a family with fierce principles and achieved everything on his own from an early age. He loved sports and was a martial arts black belt. In addition to his love of exercise, Greg was also a fan of guns. Both he and Michelle had guns that they kept in their home in Keller. Michelle's gun, a silver .40 caliber pistol, was kept in a safe, but Greg kept his gun, a black Liebherr .45 caliber, always loaded in a case under his bedside table. The couple was determined to make their marriage a success. They threw birthday parties for their children from other marriages at their home in Keller. Michelle's adult children would have barbecues and swim parties. Very often the house was full of friends. But despite the picturesque suburban home and a precocious daughter, Greg and Michelle were not the classic American couple. They met through an online community for bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism, and their wild adult house parties led to numerous complaints from neighbors. Without making the matter public, the couple decides to move out. The night before, Michelle and Greg had been unable to sleep for a long time. They were preparing to buy a new house for $4.5 million. They emotionally discussed the upcoming event. Greg stayed in the bedroom alone. Michelle went out to her crying daughter and fell asleep with her in the room. On October 13, 2011, at 4:40 a.m., an emergency call came in. A crying woman screamed into the phone that she and her husband had been attacked by a robber. She was injured, and her husband had been shot. Within minutes, police arrived at the scene of the tragedy. Inside the home, detectives found a television on full volume and a baby sleeping on the couch. Michelle's daughter was sound asleep and unaffected in any way by the attack that occurred. The woman's behavior alerted police officers. She was behaving rather strangely and did not look like she had just experienced a burglary. Soon, the gated community was filled with police cars, detectives, and forensic experts. The lot was cordoned off, and police searched every inch of the nearly 5,000-square-foot home. Michelle was fully dressed, had her hair styled, and was acting very calm. She told police she was asleep, but her clothing and demeanor said otherwise. As the only witness, Michelle was taken to the Keller Township Police Station for questioning. After several hours of talking to police and investigators, Michelle's story began to fall apart like a house of cards. According to the woman, the intruder, dressed in all black, hit her on the head with a wrench. She fell from the blow, but was conscious and heard a gunshot. The stranger then fled through the back door of the house. Michelle Williams's account did not match what police saw at the scene. Greg Williams was shot in the head while lying in bed. A .45 caliber handgun, presumably used by the intruder, was found near the back door next to a wrench. There were no fingerprints on either weapon. Neither was found to show any signs of forced entry. The family's valuables and money were untouched. Examined CCTV footage from a neighbor's camera showed that only one car had entered the gated community in the hours before the crime. Police confirmed that the car belonged to a newspaper delivery man. To confuse the investigation, Michelle came up with a version of the attack. She hit herself with a wrench and made their large house look like the scene of the attack. But detectives did their due diligence and noticed a number of details that didn't add up. Michelle Williams was fully dressed, her hair was styled, and she had fresh makeup on her face. It gave the impression as if she was waiting for someone. The gun used during the crime was found in the house, without any fingerprints, and the final detail that proved Michelle's lie was the $20,000 in cash that was not stolen in the robbery. Michelle had no explanation for why a successful businessman and devoted father decided to take his own life, but she was able to explain her behavior. Michelle claimed she wanted to spare their young daughter the bitter truth about her father's self-inflicted death. She admitted to police that she wiped down the gun and washed Greg's hands to cover up fingerprints before desperately staging a home invasion and calling emergency services. As bizarre as that explanation was, it became obvious to police why no evidence was found in the house. Michelle admitted to wiping the crime scene with bleach and hitting herself in the face with a wrench to present a more realistic picture of the attack. From the beginning, Keller police doubted the credibility of Michelle's testimony. But at the time, no physical evidence was presented linking her to the crime. Michelle was arrested for perjury, but was soon released home. Around 5 p.m. on the evening of her husband's murder, Michelle went to her sister Laura's home and did not mention the late Greg's name once during the evening. Michelle cried from time to time, but it didn't seem sincere, her sister Laura Cusick said when questioned by police. The morning after the tragedy, Michelle woke up in a great mood. She was beautifully dressed, with her hair styled and makeup on. In high spirits, the recent widow went for breakfast at a famous restaurant that served the best pancakes with syrup. While the police were looking into the theory that Greg had taken his own life, struggling to find a motive and obtain credible evidence of it, Michelle herself presented the investigation with first a motive and then evidence of her guilt. Going through the documents from the first interrogation, the investigators were attracted by Michelle's words that she didn't care about a single penny. But her actions proved otherwise. After Greg's death, Michelle quickly begins liquidating assets from family companies and spending large sums of money. She cashes checks through Greg's IT company. The amount of checks cashed is not disclosed anywhere. In all likelihood, we are talking about a lot of money. After receiving cash from the sale of the Blueberries frozen yogurt store in Keller, Michelle made one of her biggest blunders. She went to the insurance company, hoping to get a payout on Greg's life insurance policy. Michelle was the sole beneficiary on Greg's life insurance policy, which was taken out on August 12, 2011, almost exactly 2 months before he was killed. But one important fact the woman missed. According to the terms of the insurance policy, Greg's death was not an insured event because he left his life voluntarily, and at the last moment, she was denied the money. The desire to get the insured sum of $600,000 was the main motive for the crime. Later, another important fact of financial fraud comes to light that casts suspicion on the widow. Fictitious financial documents for a mortgage loan were used to purchase the house that Greg and Michelle had been preparing for on the eve of his death. The account numbers were intentionally changed, and the lender did not immediately notice the elaborate fraud. When Greg died, Michelle canceled a meeting with the mortgage company, and the fake account was not discussed until it caught the attention of the police. Michelle, confident of her impunity, writes a check for $18,000 to attorney Kenneth Wincorn and takes a week-long vacation to Grapevine with her children. During the 3-month investigation into Greg Williams' death, police were able to unravel his wife's web of deceit. An autopsy was performed on Greg, which proves that the man was shot from a range of 12 to 18 inches. Moreover, the toxicology examination conducted provided a report proving that Greg had a large dose of sleeping pills in his system at the time of his death. Also, the police determined that there was no assault on the house. Mrs. Williams sedated her husband and shot him from a foot away after turning up the volume on the television. Daughter Michelle, who was asleep in her room, did not hear anything. On November 3, 2011, based on the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's report, Greg Williams' death was officially ruled a homicide. Michelle Williams was arrested on January 9th as she was on her way to a fitness center. She was charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and making a false statement to police. Michelle was both the only witness to the crime and the only suspect. Bail was set at $522,000 to be released from custody pending a court hearing. But Michelle spent a week in custody and was released on $85,000. Dressed in gym clothes, Michelle walked out of jail with a GPS monitor and under the arm of attorney Kenneth Wincorn, who was now officially representing her. Greg's first wife, Kathy, was furious when she found out that attorney Wincorn was defending Michelle. That money she paid him was part of Greg's estate, and it should never have gone to pay the legal bills of the woman who was accused of killing him. Online court records list Kenneth Wincorn as the attorney for Katie and Greg's divorce in 2003, and Wincorn's name and signature appear on legal documents regarding the custody agreement for their shared daughter Taylor in 2008. However, Kenneth Wincorn's defense of collusion with Michelle Williams will be exonerated by providing evidence. The divorce was handled by his company, and he personally never represented Greg. Kenneth Wincorn said he first learned of Greg's murder from an IT company employee. It was very shocking, Wincorn says, adding that Michelle later sought his help. After her plot to cash in on Greg's death is foiled, Michelle Williams changes her name to Shelley and appears as a fitness guru hoping to start a new life. On Facebook, Shelley publicly announced her relationship with Gene Wallace, a friend of her oldest son, a man nearly 15 years younger than her. Shelley and Gene opened a fitness club in Bedford and heavily promoted it online. Armed with an ankle bracelet with a GPS tracker, Michelle spent the next few months enjoying her new boyfriend, fitness classes, and court hearings. She often appeared in court dressed for a night out on the town, wearing miniskirts, knee-length boots, and deep-cut blouses. She never mourned Greg's death for a second, says Greg's ex-wife, Kathy. Rob Conover was friends with Greg Williams for more than 20 years and attended many of Michelle's hearings. He recalls how she deftly manipulated police officers at the courthouse, making them see her as an innocent woman in need of protection. On October 9, 2013, 45-year-old Michelle Williams took a plea deal with the county and pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence and deadly conduct. She will receive 18 years in prison for tampering with evidence and for deadly dangerous conduct, a third-degree felony that only exists in a few states. Although Michelle admitted that she cleaned the gun and Greg's body, the absence of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about whether the first-degree murder charge would stick. Things can go differently. Play big. Win big or lose big, Michelle said in an interview. With the plea bargain, I expect to do a couple years, and after that, I'll be out on parole. But in February 2014, Michelle Williams, in an interview, suddenly changes her testimony and says she is not guilty of the crime. The judge immediately rescinds the plea bargain and sets a date for the first trial. Opening arguments have begun in the trial of a Texas woman, dubbed by the media as Keller's Black Widow, who was accused of intentionally targeting her husband in 2011 for an insurance payoff. Michelle Williams, 45, was charged with the crime. In court, prosecutors described the crime as a clearly planned scheme of acts to profit from Greg's substantial life insurance policy. In their opening statement, prosecutors told jurors that Mrs. Williams shot her husband in the head after drugging him with sleeping pills beforehand in order to collect on his life insurance policy. The motive was money, time-tested money. Greed, Assistant District Attorney Jack Strickland said in court. Although Michelle admitted that she cleaned the gun and Greg's body, the absence of her DMA at the scene raised doubts about whether the first-degree murder charge would stick. In response to an interview request, Michelle's attorney released a statement on her behalf. Attorney Kenneth Wincorn described the difficulties in the case caused by the spotlessly clean crime scene. The prosecution struggled to prove a premeditated crime, disregarding the fact that there was no DMA from the suspect. In repeated searches, cleaning products were found, but it stands to reason that Michelle's fingerprints were on them, since the products were in the house where she lived and did the cleaning. If the jury concludes that Michelle tampered with evidence of Greg's death, making it look like the man had spontaneously passed away, and then cleaned up the crime scene by hiding evidence and then lying about it, she will get a life sentence. But if Michelle is sentenced as scheduled on April 21st, no jury will ever get a chance to hear the whole story and decide on the appropriate punishment. Through careful questioning of the Williams couple's friends and acquaintances, information regularly emerged about the unfavorable environment that had prevailed in their family for a long period of time. According to the studied correspondence in social networks and messengers, it was found that the couple quarreled very often, and the reason was finances. At the trial, prosecutors said that in the hours leading up to the violent death, Greg Williams argued with his wife over their finances and even slapped her for spending a large amount of money that had been set aside as a down payment on a house. But Michelle Williams' defense argued that Greg Williams had taken his own life and that the successful business owner needed his wife alive, not dead. According to defense attorney Clay Graham, Greg Williams often suffered from depression and regularly used sedatives and steroids. On the eve of the crime, he was allegedly severely depressed due to the loss of his grandmother and best friend, who ironically had taken his own life. Defense counsel told the court that when Michelle Williams found her husband dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, she panicked and in a fit of fear began to cover up the tragedy without realizing it. She had one goal: to protect her 4-year-old daughter from psychological trauma by hiding the truth from her. Michelle Williams never once changed herself, presenting at court hearings in different images, with styled hair and manicure. At one hearing, the defendant, dressed in an off-white blouse and black vest, showed little emotion throughout most of the trial, but did not forget to wipe away tears during a presentation of photographs showing images of the body of murdered Greg Williams. The court also heard testimony from Michelle Williams' adult son, Andrew O'Brien, who said his mother, Michelle Williams, asked him to help frame Greg Williams' ex-wife, Kathy. She planned to blame her for Greg's death using the motive of unreconciled differences over the custody of their daughter, Taylor. But that plan was a failure from the get-go. After all, there was never any disagreement between the former spouses about the custody of their daughter, and it would have been very difficult to prove otherwise. Asked about his reaction to his mother's unusual request, 26-year-old Andrew O'Brien said he was very shocked by such a proposal and thought she was having a mental breakdown. Michelle confronted her sons at the trial when they testified against her. The jury later found Michelle guilty of felony tampering with physical evidence. According to the show, she provided false information that she was pregnant with twins, hoping to delay her sentencing. But this version was not confirmed and the verdict was announced. Michelle's acting abilities and her natural charm, which she tried her best to demonstrate during each hearing, did not spare her from a harsh sentence. Sandwiched between a scenario in which she was a cold-blooded criminal and one in which she was portrayed as a deranged wife and mother acting on impulse, Michelle chose the latter. "He did it," she said, wrapping her arms around her head. Michelle even congratulated the detective on solving the case. "I wouldn't have gotten through the day," she said. "You've won." Even before the police admitted to doubting Michelle's story, few believed Greg had lost his life. He had too much to live for, and he knew all too well how much pain an untimely death causes. Kathy Williams believes that Michelle's relationship with Gene Wallace began when Greg was still alive and may be the elusive motive for this crime. If Greg had found out she was sleeping with her little boyfriend, he would have dumped her, and she would have gotten nothing, Katie says. Greg was willing to put up with a lot, but he wasn't willing to put up with cheating. "She's ruined so many lives you can't even imagine," Brandon says. "She's a professional manipulator. If the courts had gone further and interviewed all of us, things could have gone in a different direction. Michelle was sentenced to 60 years in prison. The judge also ruled that she would have to serve a minimum of 30 years before being eligible for parole. Michelle currently remains incarcerated at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Michelle Williams is a felon and fraudster who is currently serving time in prison for all of her willful acts. She has never shown remorse for her actions and still refuses to take full responsibility for her crime. Every day, hundreds of thousands of individuals go missing worldwide. Although many are quickly found or return on their own, about a third are discovered deceased eventually. The remainder disappear without a trace, their fates enshrouded in mystery. Mysterious and unsolved cases of disappearances frequently captivate the public and become the basis for detective novels or fantasy films. Yet, sometimes reality can be more terrifying than fiction. The disappearance of 19-year-old student Katie Poore stands out as particularly unique. Her case was so baffling that even NASA experts participated in the effort to find her. Despite their best efforts, she could not be found alive. This shocking event deeply affected the nation, especially the normally peaceful town of Moose Lake, where Katie resided along with other students. Katie Elizabeth Poore was born on February 28, 1980, in the quaint town of Duluth in St. Louis County, Minnesota. She was the second child in a loving and ordinary family. She grew up with her older brother, and they shared a strong bond since childhood. When Katie started school, the family relocated to Carlton County and settled in Barnum. Katie was known for being sociable, active, and highly creative. She studied vocals, played guitar, and eventually began performing in a music band where she happily showcased her talents. Katie also had a deep love for animals. She volunteered at a shelter for stray cats and dogs and participated actively in cleaning and beautifying local parks. Her beauty was well recognized. In high school, she even participated in a city beauty contest where she achieved second place. After high school graduation, she attended college and moved to Moose Lake, a quiet and picturesque town in the same county as her family. By that time, Katie had been dating Mark for a couple of years. They both went to university and planned to get married. The couple rented a small but cozy apartment in a good neighborhood. Katie attended law school to study criminal law while her fiancé focused on computer technology. They both worked part-time jobs to support themselves financially, save for their wedding, and avoid relying on their parents. Katie secured a job at a gas station near a busy highway where she took night shifts several times a week. She enjoyed this work because it allowed her to manage her schedule efficiently. However, her parents were concerned about her safety since she was alone at the shop during nighttime along the highway, connecting several large cities. A place bustling with traffic around the clock, with various people visiting the gas station and store. Despite their concerns, Katie reassured them that there was no need for worry due to surveillance cameras everywhere and the presence of a nearby popular diner that remained crowded most of the time. On May 26, 1999, 19-year-old Katie Poore went to the store for her regular shift. It appeared to be an ordinary day. She switched with her colleague who had worked during the day and took up her position behind the cash register. Around midnight, a woman came by the gas station, filled her tank with gasoline, and walked into the store to pay and buy some snacks. After gathering her items, she approached the cash register but found it unattended. Confused, she waited for a while, then went to the utility room and called out. There was no answer. This felt strange, since the store was fully operational, lights on, doors unlocked. When no clerk appeared after 10 minutes, she decided to contact the police. Police arrived promptly, examined the store and its surroundings, but found nothing unusual or alarming. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood traces. Everything was in place, including a good amount of money in the cash register. Robbery was ruled out immediately. Initially, it was assumed that Katie might have left voluntarily due to an urgent matter. However, all her personal belongings were still in the store. Keys to her house and car included. Her vehicle was parked outside. This posed a question. How did Katie leave? On foot. Abandoning her car and purse seemed unlikely, pointing towards a more troubling scenario. The police reached out to Katie's parents to report her disappearance and inquire if they had any clues about her whereabouts or any reasons she might have abruptly left. Mr. and Mrs. Puya assured them that Katie was always responsible and would not abandon her duties as she highly valued her job. Katie's fiancé corroborated their statements, expressing his utter confusion regarding her sudden disappearance. At this point, Katie Puya was officially reported missing and the store treated as a potential crime scene. The investigation kicked off with a review of footage from 4 surveillance cameras installed in the store, each one positioned strategically to cover every angle inside. The initial hours of Katie's shift revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing suspicious occurred during those early hours. Around 11 p.m., a girl walked into the store. She chatted with Katie for about 10 minutes but didn't purchase anything. From their conversation, it was clear that she was either an acquaintance or friend of the missing student. Approximately half an hour later, A entered the store. He looked around but quickly left. Shortly after, he came back in. At moment, Katie had gone to the back room, and it seemed he might have been observing her from outside through the glass door. He re-entered the store and headed directly towards the back room. Unfortunately, there were no cameras in that section of the store, so what happened next is unclear. A few minutes later, Katie and this unknown man emerged from the back room together and moved toward the exit. The man was walking behind Katie, holding her by the hair with one hand and pressing his other hand against her back. It was evident that he was threatening her with a weapon, likely a knife or gun, and forcing her to leave with him. Essentially, this constituted an abduction from her workplace. This information was crucial. However, further investigation faced challenges because there were no cameras at the gas station adjacent to the store or in its parking lot. Consequently, determining where the suspect took Katie, his vehicle details, and his direction of travel was impossible. Given that the gas station and store were situated on an isolated stretch near a busy highway, with no places to hide or go except along the road, it's likely someone would have seen if he had forcefully led her away on foot and contacted law enforcement. Therefore, it's presumed that he took her to the parking lot and placed her in his car. Another problem arose from the poor quality of the video footage from existing cameras. It was 1999 after all, and having any cameras at all back then was quite fortunate. The videos were grainy, black and white images that rendered identifying features unclear, making it difficult to create a facial composite swiftly. Law enforcement and volunteers who joined the search scoured several miles around the gas station and store looking for possible clues, but found nothing conclusive. Investigators also interviewed Melinda, the sole witness who spoke with Katie shortly before she vanished. Melinda confirmed she was a close friend and fellow student working part-time at a nearby diner. She mentioned seeing a suspicious man harassing both a customer inside the diner and another woman in the parking lot earlier on, suggesting to each woman that they should get better acquainted. Both declined his suggestions and walked away separately. Melinda's work shift ended at 11 p.m. As she locked the door and prepared to go home, a man showed up again. He approached, asking if the restaurant was closing and what time it would open in the morning. Melinda found his question odd and hurried to inform Katie about the visitor, suggesting they call the police. Katie, however, reassured her that everything was fine since the store had plenty of cameras. Melinda then remembered the man drove a black Ford F-150 pickup truck. They left the parking lot around the same time, but he overtook her quickly. She recalled part of his license plate, 5 and 57, and the letter Y. This was an important clue, but in the late 90s, without a national electronic database, locating the vehicle took time. Both Melinda and another witness at a gas station provided only rough descriptions of the suspect. Given it was dark outside, they couldn't get a clear look at him. They described him as a white male with long blonde hair, aged between 35 and 40. He spoke without an accent and wore a baseball cap that partially hid his face. The surveillance videos were not much help either due to low resolution. For the first time, police sought help from NASA specialists to enhance image quality and reveal more details of the suspect's face. Using advanced technology meant for astronomical purposes, they reconstructed a clearer image of him. The task was complicated, strange angles, as he never looked directly at any camera in the footage. Still, authorities were satisfied with the final composite portrait. This portrait was distributed to police stations statewide and frequently shown on news channels. Citizens were urged to stay vigilant and report any sightings of individuals matching this description or driving a similar vehicle. Soon after, police began receiving dozens of calls daily, though most turned out to be false leads. About a couple of days later, authorities detained a 25-year-old man who bore a strong resemblance to the individual the composite portrait. Additionally, he had a prior criminal record for robbery and harassment. However, he was soon released due to a notable distinguishing feature: a large tattoo covering his entire arm, which the suspect in the video did not have. An important detail was that the man who escorted Katie out of the store wore a Yankee baseball team t-shirt with the number 23. According to Melinda, when the suspect approached her in the parking lot, he was dressed differently. Yet, upon reviewing the surveillance footage, she had no doubt it was him. A week later, a call came from Minneapolis. A worried man reported that the person in the portrait looked like his neighbor, who worked as a cleaner and drove a similar car. A couple of weeks ago, right around the time of the girl's abduction, this neighbor unexpectedly cut his long blonde hair and began growing a beard. This suspect turned out to be 50-year-old Donald Hutchinson. It was discovered that he had recently quit his job without any apparent reason, which raised suspicions. On the day of Katie's disappearance and the following day, he didn't go to work because he reported not feeling well. Former colleagues confirmed that he drove a black Ford F-150 with a license plate matching what police were looking for. Donald Aubin Hutchinson's real name is Donald Allen Blom. He was born in Minnesota in 1949 and grew up in a dysfunctional family where his father was an alcoholic who abused both him and his mother. As a teenager, Donald himself started drinking and displayed uncontrollable aggressive behavior that troubled everyone around him. Consequently, he was transferred to a special school for difficult children. At age 25, Blom was convicted and imprisoned after kidnapping and assaulting a 14-year-old girl. However, he served only 3 years before being released on parole. Shortly after, he was arrested again for assault and harassment, but received another short sentence. In 1983, Donald was arrested yet again. This time, he had kidnapped 2 teenage girls, taken them to a deserted area, and tied them to a tree. He assaulted one of the girls and strangled the other several times, then revived her, making it a game of life and death. Fortunately, a passerby walking with a dog heard their screams and saved them. Consequently, Blom served 9 years in prison. Upon his release, he changed his name, moved to another city, and avoided police attention for a long time. He got married after his release, and his wife bore him 4 children. On the surface, their family appeared happy. The man secured employment. However, his addiction to alcohol and substances turned him into a menace. His wife and children often suffered from his violence, but occasionally this monster sought other victims. Nobody was aware of Donald's criminal past. He went to great lengths to conceal it by changing his name and identity. He even altered his appearance by growing long hair and a beard that he sometimes shaved off. Initially, the police lacked solid grounds to detain him. They could only question him during their investigation. The suspect owned around 20 acres of land, just 12 miles from the store where Katie was kidnapped. In fact, right after Katie's disappearance, the police had already visited him upon learning about his black pickup truck. Donald claimed that he had sold the vehicle and that its license plate differed from the one they sought. He even provided a document as proof, which later turned out to be fake. Following these findings, the police secured a search warrant for his house and land property. They discovered an unexpected surprise in a large barn, where Donald attempted to hide his black Ford F-150 behind old junk and furniture. The license plate matched the one identified by Melinda. With this discovery, Donald's calm facade began to crack. Nonetheless, he continued denying any involvement in Katie's disappearance. Yet even with this significant lead, the pickup truck, there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him at that point. The suspect's license plate was only a partial match, and there were neither witnesses nor video evidence confirming that Katie had been taken in that specific car. Consequently, the police shifted their focus to searching the house, aiming to find traces of the missing girl, or even Katie herself. The interior was spotless. No blood traces, no signs of forcible confinement, and no clues linked to Katie's disappearance were found. However, inspecting the property posed challenges as it spanned over 24 acres and required more than a day's effort, along with significant resources. To address this, National Guard personnel and hundreds of volunteers joined in the search and investigation efforts. The first day yielded no results. By the end of the second day, however, police stumbled upon peculiar ashes, suggesting that something had been burned or cremated over an extended period. Among these ashes were bone fragments, which criminologists meticulously collected and sent to a laboratory for analysis. While most bones were animal remains, parts of a human skeleton were also discovered, including a tooth that warranted closer examination. Experts identified that the bones belonged to a young woman aged between 18 and 23 years old. However, DNA testing faced complications because prolonged exposure to high temperatures had destroyed much of the material. When criminologists from other states joined the investigation, they managed to extract a DNA fragment matching the DNA of the missing girl. Unfortunately, this crucial evidence was deemed only indirect and could not conclusively establish the suspect's guilt. Hence, it became imperative to analyze the tooth found among the ashes to determine if it belonged to Katie. It was revealed that this tooth contained a rare filling made of silicone and zirconium, an innovative dental material. Conversations with Katie's dentist confirmed this unusual filling. He immediately recognized his work since he had used materials obtained from an international dental conference on her just a week before she vanished. Though all collected evidence remained circumstantial collectively, a combination strong enough, it sufficed for law enforcement officials to arrest Donald and detain him until trial proceedings concluded. Thus unfolded developments leading up to his incarceration, pending further proceedings. On June 22, 1999, the man immediately pleaded not guilty, sought legal counsel, and expressed his willingness to cooperate with the investigation, prove his innocence. During a more thorough examination of his belongings, law enforcement discovered multiple firearms for which he lacked permits. Shortly thereafter, Donald began confessing. He admitted to kidnapping Katie from the store, bringing her to his property where he strangled her and subsequently burning her body. However, he denied any coercion related to intimacy with the victim, attributing his inability to do so to the significant amount of alcohol and illegal substances he had consumed. Donald further claimed that he used only firewood and paper to incinerate the remains, but experts asserted that this method alone wouldn't suffice without additional fuel. That evening was marked by aimless driving around the neighborhood. Upon noticing Melinda at a gas station, Donald initially intended to follow her when she left, but then changed his mind. He overtook her and proceeded home to change clothes before heading back to the store where Katie worked. This accounts for discrepancies in eyewitness testimony regarding what he was wearing. 2 weeks later, Donald unexpectedly recanted his confession, asserting his innocence once again. He alleged that he had been coerced into confessing due to threats made against him and his wife. His wife attempted to support this claim during the trial by offering an alibi, asserting that he was at home with her throughout that evening and did not leave the residence. In a striking turn of events during the trial, 2 former victims from 1983 came forward. They testified about their experiences with Donald, depicting him as a ruthless sadist who had subjected them to torture and exploitation. The evidence presented along with the witness statements led the jury to unanimously declare the defendant guilty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of. Subsequently, Donald's wife admitted she lived in fear of her husband, habitually beat her and their children. She expressed that she felt compelled to provide him with an alibi out of fear for her own safety. After disclosing, she changed her last name, took their children, and moved to another state where they wouldn't be known. On a related note, detectives working on this high-profile case suspected that Blom could be a serial rapist and murderer. They linked him to several unsolved crimes involving the disappearance of young girls under similar circumstances. Specifically, he was suspected in the strangling of Wilma Johnson, found in 1983, as well as the 1993 abduction and murder of student Holly Spangler. In 2021, Blom was transferred to a medium-security prison at MCF Faribault. Conditions there were much more lenient, and he referred to it as a vacation. However, after complaints and protests from Katie's family, Blom was moved back to a high-security facility in Stillwater, Minnesota. He passed away there on January 10, 2023, at age 73. Katie Pure's death has been covered extensively in popular television documentaries about real crimes. HLN Channel aired a series called Forensic Files, which featured an episode titled Tooth or Consequences, based on Katie's story. The Discovery Channel released an episode from their series New Detectives titled Fatal Abduction, dedicated to this particular case. Additionally, in 2010, a documentary titled From the Ashes was produced using materials from the investigation.